would have thought a television show about four mature women living in a house together in Miami, Florida, sharing bills, the ups and downs of life, and a ton of cheesecake would become a global pop culture phenomenon? But that's exactly what happened when American sitcom The Golden Girls came on the scene in the mid-80s. The show, created by Susan Harris, debuted on NBC on September 14, 1985. It ran for 7 seasons, ending on May 9, 1992. It was produced by Whit Thomas Harris Productions in association with Touchstone Television. Paul Junger Whit, Tony Thomas, and Susan Harris also all served as original executive producers. The idea for the show emerged during the filming of a television special at NBC Studios in Burbank, California. In the fall of 1984, actresses Doris Roberts and Selma Diamond, who starred on the hit NBC shows Remington Steele and Night Court respectively, made an appearance promoting the network's slate of programming for potential advertisers. The pair ad-libbed a bit about the upcoming cop show Miami Vice, changing the concept of the idea of retirees playing cards together in a Florida retirement community in a show called Miami Nice. When the spoof impressed the audience, the wheels began to turn in the minds of the network's execs. After meeting with producers Whit and Thomas, NBC Senior Vice President Warren Littlefield asked if they would be interested in delivering a pilot script for Miami Nice. They were, but their writer wasn't. Whit had the perfect replacement though. His wife, TV writer, producer, and creator of ABC sitcoms Soap and Benson, Susan Harris. Littlefield was so impressed when he received her script that he immediately greenlit the production. The owner of the house was a widow named Blanche Devereaux, played by Rue McClanahan. She was a Southern belle who worked at an art museum and portrayed as lusty, self-absorbed, and obsessed with her looks, but also vulnerable and insecure. Blanche was born into a wealthy family and grew up on a plantation outside of Atlanta, Georgia, prior to her relocation to Miami, where she lived with her husband George until his death. Their marriage produced 5 children. Fellow widow Rose Nyland, played by Betty White, and divorcee Dorothy Zbornak, played by B. Arthur, move in after they both responded to an ad Blanche placed looking for roommates on the bulletin board of a local grocery store a year before the start of the series. Sweet, naive Rose was from the small farming town in St. Olaf, Minnesota. She often drove the other ladies crazy with her outlandish stories of life growing up in her hometown. She was also happily married to Charlie, with whom she had 5 children. Rose moved to Miami upon his death. She eventually finds work at a grief counseling center, but later switches careers and becomes assistant to a consumer reporter at a local TV station. Rue and Betty were ideal choices since they already had an ongoing rapport after working together on Mama's Family. Initially, producers wanted to cast Rue as Rose and Betty as Blanche, based on roles they had previously played. Betty as man-hungry Sue Ann Nivens on The Mary Tyler Moore Show, and Rue as the sweet but scatterbrained Vivian Harmon in Maude. Eager not to be typecast, they took the suggestion of pilot director Jay Sandrich and switched roles. 80-year-old widow Sophia Petrillo, played by Estelle Getty, was born in Sicily, Italy, and moved to New York City after fleeing an arranged marriage. She ultimately married Salvador Sal Petrillo, with whom she had 3 children. She was a straight talker, very wise, and a great cook. Initially a resident of the Shady Pines retirement home after having had a stroke prior to the start of the series, she ends up moving in with Blanche, Rose, and her daughter Dorothy in the pilot episode, following a fire at the institution. Estelle auditioned for and won the role due in part to the rave reviews she garnered in her off-Broadway role reprisal for the 1984 Los Angeles run of Torch Song Trilogy. Dorothy was a substitute teacher from Brooklyn, New York, born to Sicilian immigrants. She became pregnant while still in high school, resulting in a shotgun wedding to ex-husband Stanley Spornak, played by Herb Edelman. Their union produced 2 children. Dorothy was acid-tongued, short-tempered, and practical. Though Harris had created the character of Dorothy with a B. Arthur type in mind, Broadway legend Elaine Stritch ended up being the strongest contender for the part. That option quickly went out the window, though, after she alienated the producers by improvising her dialogue and dropping an F-bomb during her audition. Even though she was under the impression that B didn't want to participate, Harris asked Rue if she could persuade her, with whom she worked previously on Maude, to take the role. It turned out that the reason B wasn't interested was because she didn't want to be a part of a Maude and Vivian meet Sue Ann Nivens situation. After Rue explained that she was going to play Blanche and Betty was going to play Rose, B's interest was finally piqued. She read the script, loved it, and signed on, becoming the last main character cast. At the time of the airing of the pilot, Rue was 51, B was 63, Betty was also 63, and Estelle was 62. Also in that first episode, a gay housekeeper named Coco, played by Charles Levin, was featured, but the role was dropped before the second episode. There was no need for the character after producers realized that some of the strongest scenes were when the four women were interacting with one another around the kitchen table, and introducing someone else into the mix would disrupt that. The Golden Girls, shot in front of a live studio audience, was a ratings hit right from the start, becoming a staple for the network on Saturday nights. During its original run, the show received 11 Emmy Awards and 4 Golden Globe Awards. All the lead actresses won individual Emmys for their performances on the show. After the completion of season 5, some uncertainty arose over whether B would commit to future seasons or leave the show once her contract expired to pursue other projects. She felt the characters had been in every possible scenario and wanted to end the series while it was still successful.
We did extraordinary work on Golden Girls, and so after 7 years I had signed for the last 2 years, I thought it really is time to leave. We've done it. We can't top this, and I know I did the right thing.
In the hour-long series finale, watched by 27.2 million viewers, Dorothy marries Blanche's Uncle Lucas, played by Leslie Nielsen, and moves to Hollingsworth Manor in Atlanta. Now, here are some fun facts about the Golden Girls. The theme song, Thank You for Being a Friend, was originally written and recorded by Andrew Gold, appearing on his 1978 album, All This and Heaven Too. The version used for the show, however, is sung by Cynthia Fee.
Thank you for being a friend. Travel down the road and back again. Your heart is true. You're a pal and a confidant.
Estelle didn't become an actress until she was in her 50s. Even though she played an 80-year-old on the show, she was actually 1 year younger than B. When the show was originally pitched, the character of Sophia was meant to be merely an occasional guest star. The producers underestimated the appeal of Estelle, though. Sophia ended up being so popular, or as they say in Hollywood, she tested strongly with preview audiences, that the producers quickly made her a regular character. Getting into character to play Sophia was no small feat. Estelle spent hours transforming into her, including putting on heavy makeup, thick glasses, and a white wig. She continuously battled stage fright during her tenure on the show. At times, she even froze on camera while filming. The problem, which affected her from the very beginning, grew worse as the show went on. According to Rue, by the end of season 3, Estelle's anxiety had become a serious problem, and she had increasing trouble memorizing her lines. Eventually, cue cards were introduced to help her. A British Golden Girl by the name of Queen Elizabeth was a huge fan of the show. So much so that in 1988, the cast was invited across the pond to perform at the London Palladium in a variety show attended by the royals. While all the ladies worked well together and shared a mutual respect, both Betty and Rue have both talked about not having the warmest relationship with B. In 2011, Betty stated that she believed it was her positive attitude and perky demeanor that got on B's nerves. Despite this, the two, who lived near each other in LA, would sometimes commute together, and Rue even said that B wouldn't go to lunch with her unless Betty was there. Rumor has it that their different acting philosophies, as well as B possibly resenting Betty for being first of the group to win the Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actress, were the main contributing factors for why she related to Betty the way she did. Rue has been quoted as saying that she and B didn't have a lot of relationship going on, and that B was a very eccentric woman. Betty and Rue, on the other hand, did develop a very close bond. Blanche's accent was originally meant to be very different. While filming the pilot, the director told her not to use a strong Southern accent, but to use her natural Oklahoma accent instead. But once the show was picked up and a new director came on board, he insisted that she did use a Southern accent, believing it would be much more appropriate for the character. Blanche's Miami home was actually in another city in another state. Even though the girl's official address was 6151 Richmond Street in Miami, Florida, the original exterior shots of the house were of a home located at 245 North Saltaire Avenue in Los Angeles, California. The show was responsible for introducing a new word to non-Floridian viewers, lanai. Architecturally speaking, a lanai is a porch or veranda with a cement floor and an awning, and is sometimes also enclosed by screens. Since the word originates from Hawaii, it's also a very common element in Hawaiian homes and buildings. The Walt Disney Company, NBC, and the creators of the Golden Girls were named in a $5 million copyright infringement suit in 1986, filed by Nancy Bressfield, claiming the show was based on a script she wrote that was rejected by the network in 1980. The suit was later settled. After a couple of seasons had passed, Bea expressed her growing dissatisfaction with the disparaging jokes made about her physical appearance, which were often in the scripts.
Okay, girls, which goes better, the silver chain or the pearls?
The chain. An amateur's mistake. Can't you see that the chain accentuates the many folds of that turkey-like neck?
Well, that may be, but the pearls draw attention to the non-existent bosom.
Debbie Reynolds was brought on as a guest star in the 6th season to test her chemistry with the other actresses as a possible replacement for Bea, but producers decided that nobody could replicate the chemistry of the 4 original actresses. Much of Bea's wardrobe was custom-made, because at the time, finding off-the-rack clothing that was flattering for a taller woman was difficult. Rue had a special written clause into her contract allowing her to keep all of Blanche's custom-made clothing. While there were 4 Golden Girls, their kitchen table only had 3 chairs. Why? Well, according to director Terry Hughes, there was a technical reason for that. If all 4 were there, somebody would ultimately end up with their back to the camera. When the moment arose for all of the women to be at the table, Sophia would often pull up a stool. He also revealed that there was even a strategy with which chair they sat in. Dorothy always in the middle, and Rose and Blanche would switch sides depending on who had to leave the room the quickest. While the ladies' obsession with cheesecake was on full display on screen, in real life, Bea actually hated the dessert. One particular scene in the season 3 episode titled Mixed Blessings, in which Dorothy's son Michael, played by Scott Jacoby, announced he was going to marry a black woman, Lorraine, played by Rosalind Cash, stirred up some major controversy. Blanche and Rose walk out of the kitchen wearing mud masks, and Rose says,
This is mud on our faces. We're not really black.
As a result, Hulu pulled the episode in 2020 due to blackface concerns, but as an article in Vulture later pointed out, this was not an example of the practice of non-black performers using dark makeup to portray a caricature of black people. They were just using a skincare product. As of 2023, the episode is back on the streaming service. Susan Harris was also behind 2 Golden Girls spin-offs, Empty Nest and The Golden Palace. The initial pilot for Empty Nest was aired in a 1987 Golden Girls episode and starred Paul Dooley and Rita Moreno as George and Renee Corliss, a married couple living next to the Golden Girls characters, who face empty nest syndrome after their teenage daughter goes to college. When that idea wasn't well received, Harris retooled the series as a vehicle for Richard Mulligan, and the following year, Empty Nest debuted, starring him as pediatrician Harry Weston, a widower whose 2 adult daughters moved back home. It became a hit, airing for 7 seasons. For The Golden Palace, Betty, Rue, and Estelle reprise their Golden Girls characters. Blanche sells her house, and her, Rose, and Sophia decide to buy and run a hotel in downtown Miami. While Bea wasn't a part of the main cast, she did guest star in a double episode, reprising her role as Dorothy. Probably due to not featuring all 4 main characters from the Golden Girls, The Golden Palace never approached the popularity or acclaim of the original, airing for just 1 season from September 1992 to May 1993. After The Golden Girls went off the air, Estelle continued working in television and film before officially retiring from acting in the late 90s. She passed away on July 22, 2008 from Lewy body dementia. She was 84 years old. Bea guest starred in a number of TV series, like Malcolm in the Middle. Then, in 2002, she returned to her first love, the theater. She developed a one-woman show called Bea Arthur on Broadway, Just Between Friends. Her performance garnered her critical acclaim and a Tony Award nomination. She passed away after a battle with lung cancer on April 25, 2009, at her home in Brentwood, Los Angeles. She was 86 years old. Rue starred in various TV movies and plays. In 1997, she was diagnosed with breast cancer, for which she was treated successfully. She passed away June 3, 2010, at New York Presbyterian Hospital after she suffered a brain hemorrhage. She was 76 years old. Betty continued working mainly in TV on numerous shows, of which the biggest standout was the TV Land sitcom Hot in Cleveland for 6 seasons. She also authored several books. On December 25, 2021, she suffered a stroke. 6 days later, Betty died in her sleep at her home in Brentwood. She was the last Golden Girl to pass away at the age of 99. Every episode of The Golden Girls was made available to stream on Hulu in 2017. Buena Vista Home Entertainment has released all 7 seasons, with edits, of the series on DVD in North America and several other countries around the world.